Welcome to the Thrive Co podcast, exploring the inner side of success. I am your host, Nikki, and each week we will explore the mindset shifts, personal growth, and everyday tools that will help you to navigate ambition, manage stress, and build a life that actually feels good on the inside. Through solo episodes and honest guest conversations, we look at what it really takes to grow, change, and thrive in the modern world. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Thrive Co podcast. Welcome, guys. How are we? I hope you're all doing really well. I hope you've all had a really good week. So I am committing to slowing down. I listened back to last week's episode when I was editing it, and normally I just listen on my laptop, but I actually put my headphones in because there was some background noise in the house and stuff going on. And yeah, let's just say that given that I am studying the nervous system and how to regulate it and how to get yourself into that rest and digest, and I've qualified in breath work now, I'm certainly not regulating or slowing down or relaxing your nervous systems with the pace and tone at which I delivered that episode. So I am very sorry if you listened and thought, girl, slow the hell down. And I'm very grateful if you came back this week to listen to another episode. Now, I am going to caveat this with, I have got a sleeping dog next to the microphone. I think it's going to be fine. We've had deliveries and the mail lady come today already, so he should just lie there and chill. But I know last week that my microphone fell over and there was also some barking in the background at some point. So I'm going to endeavour to keep those noises to a minimum, but it's all real here, and let's be honest, we're not sat in a flash studio somewhere and with a producer editing all that. It's just little old me. So we work with what we've got, and it's all real life and all welcome. But I will do my best to keep the noise to a minimum. So what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about arguing for your limitations. Now that, when you first hear it, it sounds almost like a juxtaposition of words, doesn't it? Why would you argue for something that's limiting you? It just doesn't feel like something that aligns. But unfortunately, as humans, that is what we do. And this episode, I must admit, I'm going to say the word trigger. I don't necessarily want to use the word trigger because I think it's one of those words that is bandied around. I was talking to my coach this week about this, actually, that we were saying how the word trigger, a bit like the word narcissist, is bandied around now, when actually something that triggers you is literally something that brings around that real fight or flight response. It's a very big reaction, whereas it gets thrown around now as a word for just having a feeling about something, a negative feeling. So I'm not going to use that word, but I am going to say it may make you feel a certain way. You might get a bit pissed off with me. You might notice yourself getting a bit defensive and really thinking a little bit like, well, that's not me. I don't do that. I invite you to just sit with that feeling and feel the feelings, because actually I haven't met a single person on planet Earth yet that doesn't do this and doesn't argue for their limitations at some point, whether it's in a really big way or actually whether it's just, on a much smaller scale. We all do it or have done it. So in essence, what it means is when we have something in our lives that we potentially might want to do, or we might want to achieve, or we might want to experience, and we put up barriers, whether that is in the way of shortcomings or excuses or negativity that stops us from doing it. And an American author called Richard Bach, I believe, was quoted as saying, argue for your limitations and surely they're yours. And what that basically means is if you argue hard enough for them, then of course, they're real, aren't they? Those limitations are real. But often limitations or limits that we put on ourselves aren't actually limits. They're just a threshold that needs to be broken through, that for whatever reason we are telling ourselves is impossible to do. We're telling ourselves that we cannot do that and that is the absolute limit of our ability or potential, whatever it might be. And we justify it to ourselves. We justify it with all of these excuses that, in essence, all they do is keep us stuck. They just keep us stuck. So it could be that we will say, oh, I don't have the time, just don't have the time to do that. Or, oh, I don't have the money to do that. Or it could be that we say, oh, I could never do that. I'm not skilled enough, haven't got the right level of ability. Or it could be that we compare ourselves and say something like, well, it's okay for them. They can do that. I can't do that. Or they're lucky. That's quite a common one. They do that, but they're just lucky. Or it could be that it is age. So now I'm into my 40s. I hear people say a lot, oh, well, could have done that if I was younger, or, oh, I couldn't do that now that I'm in my 40s. And I think, what are you on about? Yes, you can. Or quite commonly, we will blame external factors. So whether it is a lack of support, so, oh, I'd do it, but my partner wouldn't support me, or my family wouldn't support me, or, oh, I can't do that because I can't get a babysitter, or we can't do that because we've got kids. There's loads and loads of excuses and stories that we tell ourselves as a reason not to do things that actually, if we really reflected on it, they're possible. They're possible for us. They're not easy, but they're simple. And by that, what I mean is, if we actually put the time and the energy into understanding what it is that's stopping us, 9 times out of 10, it's solvable, it's achievable. But they're born out of fear. They're born out of a fear of being judged, of showing up, maybe a fear of failure, maybe sometimes even a fear of success. I've met plenty of people that are scared to earn good money because they're worried that their friends or family will judge them, or that they won't be able to enjoy it with them, or that they will think differently of them. So it's not always a fear of failure. It's sometimes a fear of success, or a fear of what will people think of us. So some examples of this that's shown up in my life throughout kind of, I guess, more recent years. When I was dating, when I was dating, when I'd had my first marriage fail, and I will say fail because whilst I think you can have marriages that are, that aren't forever and that aren't together now and that end in divorce, they can still be a success. I don't necessarily count this as a success. I take the learnings and I completely For those of you that are regular listeners to the show, or maybe you know me personally, you won't have been able to get away without hearing me talk about Simprove. Simprove is a scientifically backed, water-based probiotic drink. You drink it daily and it has been scientifically proven to help with things like bloating, IBS symptoms, pain. It was actually a dietitian friend of mine that introduced it to me last year, and I honestly wouldn't be without it now. It's helped with my energy, with my bloating, it's helped with my immune system, and also things like my skin. The list is honestly endless. Now, I have got a code for you. So if you'd like to try Simproof, you can get 50%, that's a massive 50% off your first 3-month subscription by going on to simproof.com and putting in the code Nikki50. That's NIKKI50, or clicking the link in the show notes. Not buy into, but I completely thank that person and that time in my life for putting me on this journey. But let's be honest, it was not a success in my eyes. So when that happened and I went back onto the dating scene, I was telling myself a story that men weren't good, that I couldn't find a good man because all men lied and were dishonest and not able to commit. And I was telling myself all sorts of stories around, my experience. Don't get me wrong, it was born out of my experience. But actually, if I'd have just questioned that, I'd got amazing men in my life. I'd got, incredible men in my family and my friends' partners and people that I was working with at the time. So it wasn't about men as a whole. It was about my recent experience with men. But the story that I was telling myself, and therefore the limitation that I was putting on myself, was that men weren't great, that they weren't going to be able to, I wasn't going to be able to find somebody that was great. And therefore, it was basically a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whoever I met was feeding into this story, and but it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Every single man that I met, I think I dated 3 after my first husband before I met my husband now, Dean, and all 3 of them were not great. They were either emotionally abusive or very how would I put it, very one was a classic narcissist. One was, and like I said earlier, I don't ban that word around, you've actually diagnosed narcissist. One was very, very destructive, very needy. There was a lot of emotional insecurities around all of them, and it's because I was going into those situations with this absolute story that I was telling myself and this limit that I couldn't find anyone. And even though I was telling myself that, I was still trying, but I wasn't actually trying in the right ways. I wasn't looking at my own patterns, and I wasn't evaluating what had happened in the relationship and whether this limit was actually a truth, whether this story was actually a truth. And then another example is when I was coming to set up my business. I'd wanted to set up a recruitment business for a number of years, and I kept telling myself that I couldn't do it because I didn't have enough cash in the bank. I needed to have more savings as a safety net and a runway, which, yes, of course, was partially true, but it was a story that kept me stuck working for somebody else. And actually in recruitment, it's quite difficult to leave because they've always got you on a commission loop. So if you leave, at a certain point in the year, you're going to lose commission for the next quarter. And then you don't want to leave at the end of the year because you lose your annual bonus, and then you're into the next quarter. So it is tough, but I was telling myself that I didn't have enough experience and expertise of wider, understanding a business and the runnings of a business, and that I needed all of this cash runway. And then more recently, when I've been setting up Thrive Co, oh my gosh, the stories and limitations have come to the surface. I mean, fortunately, at this point, I am working with a coach who calls me out on my bullshit quite freely and will turn it around on me and ask me the questions like, is that really the truth? Is that, have you got evidence for that? Because if not, that's just a story that you're telling yourself. And the whole concept of pushing through your limitations and addressing your limitations came from the group that I'm in, the coaching group that I'm in at the moment, which is entitled Beyond Limits. And when I first joined that group, I actually thought it was just a jazzy title, something that they picked out of the air just to give the group a name, but actually it's much more than that. It really is about understanding the bullshit stories that we tell ourselves about what our limits are and exploring when they are just that bullshit and what we need to do in order to be able to push through that threshold. So you could be telling yourself that you don't want to go to the gym, or you can't go to the gym because you haven't got time, when actually if you looked at how much you scroll on your phone or time that you watch Netflix, you probably would have the time. It's just a priority. Now, that is different. If you are not prioritizing going to the gym, that's perfectly fine. That's a choice. But if you're telling yourself that you want to go to the gym, but you don't have the time, then in reality, that's probably a story. That's probably, if you really, really time blocked and looked at your time that you have available, your availability and what you're doing with that time, even if it meant getting up at 5 a.m, you probably would be able to do it. And this is the thing, we really need to look at what is a choice and what is a story that we are telling ourselves that we're making out as a limitation. And so by defending why a goal is, in inverted commas, impossible, you're actively preventing yourself from achieving it. And that sometimes is comforting, because if you don't put yourself out there to try, you're not going to be judged. If you don't put yourself out there to achieve the goal, you're not going to fail. And it's a protective method. And all our brain is wired to do is to protect us from back in the days when we were being chased by lions and tigers. That's probably a bad example. I don't know if lions and tigers chased us, but we were chased by big animals. All our brain was wired to do was to protect us. And it's the same now, but it doesn't know the difference between failing at a goal or going after a goal or showing up on an Instagram live or applying for the promotion or putting yourself out there in the dating pool, and literally life or death. So it's just wired to keep us in things that feel comfortable. That's why it's so hard to change a habit, because actually, even if a habit isn't good for us, it's familiar and it's therefore, in inverted commas, safe. And so by defending the goal and telling ourselves, oh, I do that, but I don't have the time, or oh, I do that, but I've got no one to look after the kids, or oh, I do that, but actually I don't have the money, which may be true, but if you really wanted to do it, you'd find a way, or you'd create the income, or you'd save. Then we're protecting ourselves and keeping ourselves stuck, but stuck in our comfort zone. And that is where our brain likes to be. That is where, as humans, we feel super happy, nice and comfortable in our little blanket of safety. But actually, that's not creating growth. You're not going to have the next level of success from staying in that little warm comfort zone. And don't get me wrong, there's people out there, I know some of them, that are not interested in personal growth. They're not interested in career success. They don't set goals. They just bumbling through life. And that is perfectly fine. I'm not sat here saying that everybody needs to be achieving and succeeding and, absolutely not. It's a personal preference. However, if you're listening to this podcast, my guess is that you want to develop, you want to grow, you want to have a growth mindset rather than just a fixed mindset where everything stays the same. So what can we do about this? How can we stop arguing for our limitations? Well, first of all, we need to question our limitations. We need to understand, is it actually a limit, or is it a threshold that we just need to push through? And this is probably where you're going to feel I'm going to say triggered, because everybody knows what that means, but you're going to feel away. You're going to feel probably quite defensive. You're going to revert back to that default of, well, no, I can't do that. No, of course I can't do that, because of the fear, because of the discomfort that it gives you to think about doing that thing. But this is where I want you to really interrogate it and really understand, are you just telling yourself a bullshit story? Do you not have the money, but actually you haven't been saving towards it, or you haven't been prioritizing, and therefore it's not about not having the money. It's about you've had the money to do something, but you've just chosen to spend it elsewhere. Is it that actually, if you look at your available time, that you could put some time aside where you would be scrolling or watching TV or doing something that maybe isn't as productive? And again, don't get me wrong, I watch Netflix in the evening just like everybody else, but if I've got, for instance, a module of my coaching course that I need to complete, that takes priority. So there might be an evening where I don't watch it, or we just watch one episode of something in bed rather than, two beforehand. So this is where you need to get really honest with yourself. You need to look at, is this actually a limit? Is it something that I absolutely cannot do? Or is it something that I could do if I really wanted to, and if I stopped feeding myself these BS stories? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is we need to look at the language that we are using and do something called catch and replace. So if you're saying, oh, I can't do that, then maybe rephrase it to, I can't do that yet. Because the yet just adds that element of opportunity, adds the element of maybe you're at a point in your life where you can't go and set up a business because you've got small children and your income is, you're a single mom and your income needs to be stable. So you can't set up the business yet. And just changing that word makes it, I think I did a whole episode on this actually, it just changes the energy around it. It changes the way that you think and feel about it. It makes it a possibility, not right now, but it is a possibility for you, rather than being, I can't set up a business. I've got a friend actually who is in the perfect position to set up their own business right now, but they've constantly told me that they can't because they've got a child. And actually, I know that they're a saver as well, so I know that they've got a money runway and savings, and yeah, it's fear. It's 100% fear, but it's not up to me to tell them that. If they came to me and asked for my opinion on it, I would offer it, but it's not for me to call them out on that. Unless they're working with me as a coach, or unless they're asking me as a friend. They have in the past asked me what I thought about the kind of the self-employment way of working and the market at the moment. And I did actually say to them then, I feel like you're telling yourself a story, but it's not my place to say. But from an outsider's perspective, I can absolutely see that that is just a bullshit story that they're telling themselves. Or maybe you are using language like, oh, I can't do that because I'm terrible at whatever it might be. Maybe, oh, I can't do park run because I'm terrible at running. First of all, question that. Are you? Do you just not like running? Are you actually bad at it? I don't particularly enjoy running. I don't mind doing canicross with Marley, but running on my own, I find it boring. But I can do it. It's not that I can't do it. It's that I choose not to because there's other ways that I prefer to move my body. So look at the language around that. So if you're saying I'm bad at that, or I can't do that because, replace it with I'm still learning. Oh, I can't do that because I'm bad at blah, blah, blah. Becomes I can't do that yet, but I'm learning how to. You see the difference in like the energy that creates around it. It's a possibility. It's an opportunity. It's not a absolute block in the road of no, that's it, done, game over. And there's little ways that you can have fun with this, like play the what if game. So, use curiosity over judgment. What if I could do that? What if I could set up the business? What if I could fit a gym routine in twice a week? What if I could learn to drive? There's so many ways that you can look at your language and play around with the possibilities and potential. And suddenly you've gone from, I can never do that, that's not for me, to actually exploring how potentially it might be. And if you're saying what if, generally speaking, your mind will go to, well, what if I could set up the business? And you'll start thinking of the flexibility it would give you, the freedom, the opportunity to work how you want to, everything that comes with that opportunity is suddenly possible in your mind rather than you not allowing yourself to think of it previously. And so using the curiosity, playing around, not committing to anything right now, but just really thinking about, what if that was possible for me? And then once you've played around with the possibility, just take one small step. You don't have to set up a business and leave your job tomorrow. You could just register a trading company. It's about 20 quid on Companies House. Or if you wanted to create a gym routine, maybe just register for the gym, become a member, or buy one nice piece of gym wear that you wouldn't mind wearing for your workouts. You don't have to sign up to a 6-month fitness plan, change your whole diet, become a High Rocks competitor. That's the sort of shit where your brain is going to close down and go, not for me, I can't do that. And then the stories come back in. But just taking that one small step, like we were saying on last week's episode about the aligned steps, or maybe it was a week before, but the aligned steps and how it's just one small step and then the path starts to unfold and you start to see what you enjoy. You might be telling yourself you can't go to the gym. Commit to a gym routine, start it and absolutely fucking hate it. And then at least you've opened your mind up to the possibility of exercise and movement. And you've looked at the time pockets in your week where you could do that. And then rather than it just being a go back to ground zero, you're then looking at, well, maybe I could join a reformer Pilates studio, or I could go running with my dog, or I could take up boxing. So then the potential and the possibility comes into play once you've taken the small step. Once you've registered the company, the idea of actually running your own business is suddenly, oh, okay, maybe this could be a reality. And that's how it started for me. I registered my company before I'd even left my old job. I registered it in the September and I didn't leave until December. I needed those 3 months to wind things down there, to get into the right mindset, to set up my tech stacks and platforms, to really understand, okay, I'm going to do this. I couldn't have on the 31st of December registered a business and then on the 1st of January started. It just wouldn't have worked like that because I wouldn't have felt in my own self ready to go and comfortable with the idea. So focus on the possibilities. And if you're struggling with the possibilities, because the other thing is you can't create solutions from the same thinking that created the problems. If you're struggling with the idea of something or there's an issue in your life, trying to find a solution in that same stuck energy, the limitations on you, telling yourself the stories, you're not going to be able to do that. It's why I have a coach, to be honest, because there are things within my own mindset that I knew I wouldn't be able to easily and quickly overcome without somebody holding a mirror to me. So I'm not saying you need a coach to do this, but certainly a friend, your partner, a relative, try and make it somebody who isn't negative and closed-minded and actually is into this type of work and is a bit more, possibilities focused, maybe somebody that's already on their self-development journey. Maybe brainstorm ideas with them. If you're struggling with how you could make things a potential or a possibility, then another pair of eyes and another brain on the situation can really sometimes just open up ideas and just pop little seeds into there, that you might not have been able to on your own. So there really is so much opportunity and possibility out there for you. And I really do encourage you to look at, what are the limitations that I'm putting on myself? It might just be one area of your life for now. You might not be ready to look at a whole scope of things, but the more that you get into the practice of questioning, is this a limit or is this just something I need to push through? The more that you become really a interrogator of your own thoughts. What is that phrase? Take your thoughts to court. So it's like, look at the evidence, and 9 times out of 10 you'll call yourself on your own bullshit. And like I say, if you can't call yourself on it, get a coach or ask a friend or speak to somebody else that you will feel comfortable hearing that feedback from. So I hope that that's been helpful. I really felt a lot of stickiness and discomfort when I was first introduced to this idea. I felt like, well, I actually did. I think on the first call that I had with my coach around the limitations that I was putting on myself and the arguments that I was actually making for those limits, and she called me out on it, and she said, look, I'll sit here and listen to your stories, but they're not true. And the longer that you keep telling yourself these facts, and this was all around me starting Thrive Co, not just renaming the podcast, but actually starting the self-development business. She said, you can sit here and argue for them, but actually all you're doing is keeping yourself stuck from achieving your potential and finding out how fucking amazing this could be. And she was right. She was absolutely right. And even now today, I still have discomfort around showing up on Insta stories, on TikTok. TikTok's the worst because you get trolls. And I have to really push through and know that the things that I'm telling myself are just the stories, and it's based out of fear. It's all around a fear of being seen and a fear of being judged. And actually, the people that are judging me are never the people that I want this to land with anyway. They're never the people that have done it themselves. They're always the ones that are so stuck in their own stories and fear that they don't like seeing other people show up. They don't like seeing other people in their power and doing things that they actually wish that they could do themselves. So remember that if you're ever worried about being judged, the people that have done the things that you want to do will never judge you. And if they do, then 9 times out of 10, it's just because they are projecting from their own place of fear anyway. So have a great week. Please go and follow the show as always, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure you are following the podcast, and don't forget to share episodes with a friend who may need it.